Greetings. I am an 18-year-old girl. My paternal grandparents gave me an international trip to Rome, along with a check to cover my expenses there for my birthday. They also gave me an envelope containing my flight tickets. The following day, my parents thought they could manipulate me into giving it to my sister. June 21st. Female, my eldest sister, is the family's golden child. My parents told me that June is majoring in architecture, so if you haven't figured it out by now, a vacation to Rome might be exactly what she needs to sharpen her abilities and see superior architectural ideas up close. I attempted to counter that since I intended to study in literature, the trip to Rome was also very essential to me. June had already turned 18 and turned down the opportunity to travel abroad when my grandparents offered it, stating that she would much prefer have the money for the trip instead. It was now my turn, and I refused to give it up for her. Furthermore, as far as I'm aware, the airline I was using didn't even have the ability to transfer your ticket to another individual, unless there were extremely specific circumstances. However, they advised me not to worry about it. All they needed was the ticket, and they would find a way forward on their own. It's been 2 weeks since my birthday, and this dispute continued for several days, so in the end I gave in and told them they could do whatever they pleased. It wasn't because I wanted to cancel the overseas vacation, even though I was genuinely looking forward to it. I knew that it wouldn't happen until I agreed to their demands, and they had already begun emotionally blackmailing me by bringing up all of the things they had done for me. It didn't seem worth it to fight with them. They were only requesting a small favor from me in exchange. I thought it was incredibly unfair of them, and I battled with them at first. However, a few days ago they said something that truly wounded my feelings, stating that they did not want the vacation to be a waste. They made a swift attempt to retract their statement, but it was already in writing. It seems that they thought the trip would be pointless if I went, but it would have significance if June did. My parents made an effort to give the impression that they had just made this declaration in order to make June's trip to Rome appear impressive on her resume, since she had already graduated. I have no idea how. In contrast to June, who would have to start working in a few months, I would always have plenty of time in the future to do these kinds of travels. I made the decision to offer the ticket to them as a result. I simply didn't want to deal with the drama of repeatedly having the same fights. I would still have the check at least. Furthermore, I wasn't shocked because I had been somewhat accustomed to this type of treatment since I was a little child. I also didn't think they would be able to do much because, based on the airline instructions I read, I truly didn't think the tickets were transferable. Nonetheless, it appears that they had found a way around those restrictions. And for that reason, yesterday when I was due to head for the airport, June ended up grabbing my boarding card and heading there when we got the call from the police, informing us that June had been in an accident and they needed to rescue her. Now it appears that June thought the cabbie wasn't going the correct way to the airport, so she attempted to take control of the steering wheel to direct him, and she did that dumb little thing out of dread of being late. Naturally, they were unable to maintain control of the vehicle and collided with a tree. With the exception of a few minor scrapes, June was comparatively unharmed, but the cab driver was gravely injured since his side of the vehicle made contact with the tree first. Thus, it's possible that he has a shattered arm and a serious cut on his forehead that required numerous stitches. He's filed charges against June for causing the accident, so in order to settle with the cab driver and avoid a trial, my parents will now need to take money out of their life savings to bail her out. And I lost self-control when I learned about this, and then the words just flowed. I ultimately had to give up my ticket and vacation to Rome, claiming that it was karma for my parents. This was yesterday. They were heading to see June and had just finished explaining everything to me. They gave me a stern look and told me that this was not something to joke about, so as soon as I spoke those words, I quickly regretted it. I attempted to retract what I had said, but they said that words had meaning, and that I couldn't just take it back and hope for the best. They were now aware of my extreme selfishness, which is why I felt it was hypocritical of them to make comments like that about my sister's accident. After all, they had claimed that they didn't want the trip to be a waste, since that is what they thought would have happened if I had gone. When I brought that up, they told me they wouldn't even respond to me politely after my comment, and they were off to visit June at the hospital. By that time, I was pretty annoyed. I therefore made the spontaneous choice to take a taxi and go to June as well, because it dawned on me that I was squandering this trip. Because my family would never recognize or appreciate me, regardless of what I did. I might as well make them despise me and lead the life I desire. I hurriedly put some clothes and my necessities in a little bag. After that, I found a ride and followed them in the taxi. When we arrived at the hospital, my parents and I nearly appeared on the floor next to the taxi driver, where June was still chatting with the police and attempting to deny that any of this was her fault, even though it most definitely was. However, I wasn't present to speak with her. She seemed quite lost and puzzled when I approached her to ask if she still had the boarding pass. I took her purse and began to search through it on my own, and I quickly grabbed the boarding pass and ran away as soon as I discovered it, going back to the taxi, perplexing everyone. After that, I made my way to the airport, where happily I arrived just in time. I got on my airplane and headed for Rome. I didn't check my phone for texts or calls when I first arrived, and I didn't realize how angry my family was with me until a few hours ago. June had just been in a horrific accident that she herself had caused, so it's clear that my parents thought I was being incredibly insensitive. But they always seemed to ignore that reality, and I was only thinking about my trip. June is also furious because she believes that I took this chance away from her, despite the fact that it was actually she who took it from me in the first place. Essentially, I'm just taking back what was rightfully mine, even though I was foolish enough to give it away. Most people agree that what I did was wrong, and that I should apologize to them for it. However, I'm not sure if I should. I was aware of my family's precarious financial situation when June wrote me a message stating that my parents would need to use their funds to settle with the driver. I could have saved the money and given my parents the check I received for my birthday, instead of going out and having fun in Rome. However, I was merely being self-centered. That's why I left for Rome after my sister had an accident. Correct. Hello. People have a lot of questions, so I'll address them so that you guys may better comprehend the circumstances. First and foremost, what was the boarding pass's problem? To be honest, I don't think either my parents or June were able to figure out a way around the regulations governing ticket transfers. She probably just intended to show up at the airport and wing it or something. As if they had been able to handle it, they would have needed June, which would have prevented me from boarding with my passport. Thus, I believe that their lack of a plan from the start was fortunate for me. Given that my family has consistently mistreated me, why did I still live with them? Why didn't I move in with my grandparents or really anybody else? You must realize that I have been accustomed to this type of care since I was a young child. My parents' favoritism for my sister used to make me feel like I had to perform better in order to win them over. I'm not claiming that makes things better overnight, though. Not that I should have been treated any differently. It was an odd and self-sacrificing way of thinking nonetheless. It's beyond my comprehension. Yet that's what I used to think. I therefore tried to be the best daughter to them for the last 18 years of my life in the hopes that they would eventually like me. And it caused me a great deal of disappointment, heartache, and frustration. I never wanted to give up, though. Given that they were still my parents, I was foolish to think that they would change their ways in the end. However, such is the natural way of a child's mind. My grandparents don't reside here either. They are far from everything I have ever known, living far outside of the city. I had no desire to alter my way of life. Consequently, they are unaware of how my parents treat me, despite the fact that I had often considered that I would be better off moving in with them. My family and I are pretty adept at hiding it when we are around other people, so I doubt anyone else does. In any case, this is the reason I didn't even consider abandoning my family. But because I'm an adult now, I believe I will carry that out. I don't believe I have to win anyone over anymore. All I can say about my relationship with June is that we have never been really close. She has nothing against me, and neither do I detest her. We are simply not compatible. That's all there is to it. In terms of our financial situation, my family is not particularly wealthy. As my dad coaches high school football and my mom stays at home, we are actually at the lower end of the spectrum because they frequently rely on my grandparents for financial support. I'm not sure how they're going to handle things at this point because they will have to admit what they did if they want money from my grandparents. That's my family's situation then. I actually don't have an explanation for why June was sitting in the passenger seat of the taxi despite the fact that many of you people have been asking me that question. She would always sit in the passenger seat, even on family car trips. So I suppose it's simply automatic behavior. She is at that location, I suppose. She does, however, always sit in the passenger seat, and I believe this may be due to her slight control issue. She practically grabbed the steering wheel of the car, since she believed a cab driver would be incompetent and would take her straight into traffic on the way to the airport. The accident was precipitated by her belief that she knew better than he did. Thus, you can see how much control she needs to have. In fact, she departed for the airport about 5 hours before the scheduled departure time. Whatever you want to make of it. First update. Hey, so after giving it some thought, I decided to simply go with the flow and enjoy my vacation because I doubt I'll get another chance like this for a few years after I start college. My parents and my home are not things I have to worry about. Since they are all adults, they are capable of handling things on their own. Furthermore, it is not my fault that they chose to lay claim to something that was not originally theirs, and as a result received a karma penalty. You were accurate. I was being silly when I thought they would appreciate what I had given up. They will always detest me, and I don't have to stop enjoying myself because of it. Well, I'm having an absolute blast right now in Rome and living the high life. This morning, I also spoke with my grandparents, explaining everything to them. This is the first time I've ever told anyone about what goes on at home. It felt great to share about the abuse I endured from my parents, who were always biased in favor of my sister, as even my friends were unaware of it. The majority of you advised me to voice my concerns and inform someone about this. When I finally told my grandparents about it, they were both surprised to learn that it had been going on for so long and that I had never heard anything about it. I told them that I had always believed that I should keep my lips shut and that my parents would ultimately come to value and appreciate me because I was a good daughter. However, it was now abundantly evident to me that this would never occur. They assured me that I had made the correct decision and that I should see them alone when I returned from my vacation to Rome. They promised to set everything up so I could move out of my parents' house and live with them. Additionally, they assured me that I wouldn't need to worry about moving out of state for college since they would cover all of the associated costs when I informed them that I would need to do so in the autumn. I guess all it took to completely turn my life around was a single talk with my grandparents, as I'm no longer concerned about where I'm going to live. Upon my eventual return, I doubt my parents will be expecting me with open arms, as I've really irritated them. Even though they had paid for June's tuition, my parents had already made it obvious to me when I first started applying to colleges that they would not be able to cover the rest of it. They really use it as an excuse, claiming that although they had already paid for one daughter's college education, I would be responsible for taking care of myself. And that's not even a concern for me anymore. Thus, I'm generally satisfied with the outcome, and I'll be returning home in a week. However, compared to before, I will undoubtedly be having a better life now. Second update. Hello, I'm presently residing with my grandparents as per their instructions after my trip came to an end a few days ago. As soon as I landed, I walked over to their property, and to my amazement, they had already set up the guest room for me to stay in, as well as transported everything from my parents' house over. My grandparents told me that after our talk in which I told them everything, they had gone to confront my parents. When I returned, they greeted me with great affection. Since my parents really did not want to take money out of their savings for the settlement, they had called them the evening of the June accident and wanted to talk about what to do and how to proceed. That being said, they were scheduled to meet regardless. And they most certainly did not want this to go to trial because, in that case, June would be in serious legal hot water, because dashcam footage would have shown that she was the one who caused the accident, and their only option would have been to settle out of court. However, it seemed that the cabbie was asking for an absurdly large sum. Therefore, my grandparents were needed to assist them. However, my grandparents confronted me first when they met, asking if it was true that my parents had mistreated me throughout my life, and even asking me to cancel my trip so June could travel in my place. They reportedly attempted to sidestep the inquiry at first by claiming that they were there to talk with June about the circumstances and how to get her out of trouble. And it didn't seem important to talk about these things because I was enjoying the time of my life in Rome. However, my parents finally lost it and admitted that it was true, after my grandparents persisted on discussing me in order to find out the truth. But by leaving my family in that difficult time, I had evidence that this was precisely the kind of treatment I needed. My parents reportedly claimed that I had only shown up at the hospital to pick up my airline tickets, meaning that I didn't really give a damn about what June or even them were going through, as long as I could get there in time for my vacation. They stated that June was always better than me at everything, and I couldn't tolerate it, which was why I had always been jealous of her. Thus, it actually wasn't their fault. They made the blatantly false assertion that they had never treated me unfairly. My grandparents simply needed to hear my parents' accusations that I was being pampered and entitled to be convinced to cut off their only son. They also indicated that they would no longer entertain it when I returned. After a fight between my parents and grandparents over this, my parents told my grandparents they may depart and that they were no longer needed because they were essentially encouraging my self-centered actions. They said that they desired my return. My grandparents were therefore more much welcome to bring me along if that was what they chose to do. In order for me to be comfortable, my grandparents eventually hired someone to pack everything in my room and relocate it to their home. I ended up crying because it hurt when my grandparents told me about what had transpired with my parents. My heart was devastated because although I knew all along, my parents didn't really care about me and I had known them for the previous 18 years. I sincerely hope that no one else has to endure such misery. However, my grandparents have always supported me, and for that, I am incredibly appreciative. Anyway, I understand now. Now that I'm moving in with them, this is my permanent residence. In a few months I will undoubtedly be attending college, but in the interim, my grandparents have assured me that they will be there to support me. They have also stated that I need not worry about anything, because they will pay for all of my educational expenditures. After I returned, I lost communication with my parents in June. I was so focused on enjoying my trip that I neglected to even read the last few messages they had sent me. When I eventually got around to checking them today, I felt that my mental state had improved. Looking back, I'm really happy that I refrained from checking these messages sooner. Doing so would have prevented me from experiencing another mental collapse. June kept saying the same things in her messages. I'm spoilt, self-centered, and entitled, and she's delighted she won't be spending any more time with me because I don't deserve her company. Anyhow, I believe she becomes slightly perverted. Though in my opinion, it's she who is undeserving of my presence. I don't even care about it. More than anything else, my parents are the ones who have hurt me. However, I'm not even shocked by what they stated to me at this point. I received a few messages from my parents informing me that what I had done was extremely callous and that they ought to have intervened as soon as I arrived at the hospital. However, the fact that they were unable to raise me properly was their fault. I then managed to get past their grasp, even when I sprinted out of the hospital to make the journey. Despite the challenging circumstances facing my family, I chose not to reply to the communication. They wrote me another lengthy message in which they expressed shock that, despite my parents' best efforts to ensure my comfortable upbringing, I had complained to my grandparents about how I had been treated. I suppose my parents don't realize how different a comfortable existence is from a happy childhood. They claim to have fed, clothed, sent me to school, and always provided me with a roof over my head. Really, there wasn't much more I could have asked for. But despite everything, I continued to be critical of my parents' treatment of me. They claimed that it would be unjust to paint them as the villains, only because I was envious of June. Subsequently, they said that their assessment of me as a waste was accurate, as that was all I truly constituted. After wasting their time and effort on me for so long, they were finally relieved to be free of me. I was moved by that so much that I felt like crying. But after talking to my grandparents, I made a commitment to myself that I would stop allowing their hurtful remarks to affect me, because it was just not worth it. I blocked my parents so they could no longer contact me, but I didn't cry as a result. I genuinely believe that after all the trauma they have given me, I need to go on and remove all memory of them from my mind entirely. Hopefully, I will begin my recovery journey and finally get over this. For me to lead the finest possible life. Though I'm not sure if it's possible, it's worth a shot. Update 3. Today was the funniest and strangest day ever. Almost 2 weeks have passed since my return from my vacation, and I still don't know anything about what my parents were up to in June. However, I assume that they are still having financial difficulties in order to reach an out-of-court settlement with the cab driver, because my folks arrived to my grandparents' place this afternoon in an angry attitude. Fortunately, they didn't even know I existed. I had no idea what to do and was hanging about the living room when my grandparents ordered me to sit down with them. I opened the door and they walked straight by me to go to the living room and sit down. As soon as we were all seated, my grandparents asked them what they were there for since they had last spoken to each other. They knew that my parents would not be happy about this decision to include me in the conversation, and I could see it on their faces. But even if they were furious about it, they did not say anything. My parents had been supporting my decisions and had made it quite obvious that they wanted no part of me. My parents declared that they would continue to do so, but before they broke up completely, they needed to settle some scores. They then produced a document with numerous calculations on it and claimed to have spent a significant sum of money raising me. And because my grandparents had so kindly assumed parental responsibilities, they expected to be forgiven and requested that my grandparents reimburse them for all of the money they had previously spent on me. They bear the responsibility for my situation. I was astounded that they had come to ask for something so absurd, and all I could do was stare at them in disbelief at how low class this was. They were seeking about $120,000, so I could tell that this was all a ploy to make us all feel like little people. It was simply insane. However, my grandparents then explained that they simply needed some alone time and left the room to talk about this. It was only my parents and I in the living room, and there was an awkward pause during which they made no effort to notice me. That was really strange to me that they didn't even look at me. But happily, my grandparents returned a few minutes later. They sat down. In an attempt to remain composed and courteous, my grandfather stated that it was true that they were taking responsibility and that they would be happy to reimburse my parents for the money they had already spent on me. As it was not a favor they had done for me, I was going to interrupt because I felt that it was really unfair that they were even requesting this amount of money. They were my parents, and it was their responsibility to bring me up. They had just fulfilled their obligation, and that too to the very minimum. Thus, they were not worthy of a single penny from my grandparents. However, my grandparents warned me against interjecting. They continued by saying that they would return this sum of money, but only if my parents returned all of the money they had borrowed from my grandparents throughout the years, which left my parents completely perplexed. They looked like deer in headlights, and I found it hilarious because I could see it on their faces. They had been owned. I wanted to laugh at them so much that I had to leave the room. I didn't return to my room until my parents had departed after that. When I asked my grandparents what had happened, they informed me that although my parents had attempted to reason their way out of the situation, there was nothing they could do. They eventually just gave us all the cursing treatment and walked out, which is quite typical of them. But in any case, after this incredible humiliation, I doubt they'll be returning very soon. My grandparents have demonstrated that they are more than capable of taking care of them on their own, so even if they return, I don't think it will be a problem for anyone. To be honest, I'm just looking forward to leaving to college in a few months, so the fact that my father is their only son is not going to make them soft on them. Indeed, it was undoubtedly the best choice I could have made to travel to Rome.